Hi there, I'm Steph the Video Guy. This is a tutorial on Sony Vegas 12. This is version 12.770, the 64-bit Windows, and we're talking about the timeline. Now if you look at the program, the first time you open it, you will see that it's they place the timeline right here. Now it's called the timeline because it's separated out into time, and it's where your trimmed footage goes. It has options for video layers as well as options for audio layers. Now there's a lot of different options that I'm not going to get into, but this is the beginner's introduction to the timeline. Alright, so here's a project that I have, and you'll notice that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 video layers, and let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 audio layers. Now we're not going to deal with audio because this program doesn't pick it up, so I'm just going to shy those. What I'm doing is I'm minimizing the track height. And you can see the tooltips tell you what's going on. You can maximize your track height to take a look at your waveforms. See, I'm just zooming in by using my track ball on my mouse. But as you see, as I zoom in, we can see our waveforms better. Now I'm going to minimize that. And so you see all of the audio layers are minimized. Now let's just look at the video layers and see how they work. Now I can also minimize the, we saw minimization and maximization of a layer size, but we can manually do that. We can actually do them as small or as big. See this line right here, it's called the zoom track height selection. I am just mousing down on top of that, and it's making the tracks bigger or smaller. Basically what I like to do is I like to make sure that whatever the height of my track, that it doesn't get rid of these buttons. These are the generated media buttons, the pan crop button, and the effect button. If I reduce them this height too much, it gets rid of the pan crop button, which you don't really care for. There's a minimum height for those. So this is why I like to keep it this height. And that's for only really generated media. This is text that you'll see here. The other media has them side by side, and so the only time these icons disappear is when we zoom back too far. Now you can see I'm zooming in and out on the timeline quite easily. Wherever I mouse down, I can zoom in using the trackball on the mouse. That makes it so easy to get around. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what these layers are here. I'm not really going to talk about masking right now. If you take a look at this layer masks this layer, and that's why we have the lettering, and then we have this sky in behind. You can see the little thumbnail right here shows sky, and this thumbnail, if you can see right there, shows text. And so I'm not going to get into talking about how masking works right now, because I believe I already have one. So alright, so what I'll do is I'm going to look at my main track and show you what it is. We've got track numbers. We've got, if you double click in this area right here, you can name it. So I can name this the main. Alright, that comes in handy. Naming comes in really handy if you are doing multicam editing jobs, or if you are if you have a lot of layers and you really need to be able to isolate them. There's a standard motion blur that in Vegas, and so this can bypass that motion blur. Now this is track motion, and I'm going to talk about track motion in a different tutorial, but track motion changes where every object on the track is and will be. If you see the preview, I'll move this down slightly, you can see that it's basically moving the whole track throughout the whole track. Of course, it's keyframeable for position, as well as 2D shadow, 2D glow, and other options. But I'm not going to get into that because that's a big conversation. Restore box, and we get back over here. You can put a track effect on the whole track if you would like. You can you can put a blur on the whole track, pixelate, newsprint, and obviously the plugins are you need to go through them one by one. When you open up Vegas for the first time, just play with grab a little piece of footage you downloaded and just play with all the effects. There's so many different effects and transitions, it's not funny. Now the automation settings, commonly you'll only need these automation settings if you are recording into Vegas and recording on the fly. I've recorded audio into Vegas as well as video on the fly. Say if I'm recording from a VHS tape or a high 8 tape, I'll record right to the timeline just to see what I've got. You can mute the layer. As you can see, it totally gets rid of the layer if I hit mute. And also it's got the solo, so that way you can isolate the track to be a solo. This is the composite level right here. This level slider is the composite level. Now you're gonna hear that term a lot in the future as you talk about using editors and nonlinear editors. But the composite level basically is the opacity of your level. It depends. If your layer is set to have a black background, the composite will just darken it. If it's set to have a white, it'll lighten it. But if it's set to have an alpha, which is the standard, it will just decrease the level and the opacity of your layer. Here we've got our composting mode. Now, if you've ever used Photoshop or something similar, you'll notice similarities in this. You've got your mask options, your 3D source alpha. If you're dealing with green screens, you'll know about that, and perhaps I'll talk about green screens sometime soon. You can use it as a screen. Now, because I don't have anything multi-layered right here to show you, it's hard to show these options, but I will go through them sometime soon. All right, and just suffice to say that if you're doing just a straight cut without having to do many effects, the source alpha is perfect for you. This is composting child. Now, the reason you would want a composting child is because your layer above it is affecting it in some way. Now, if you're using a composting mode of mask, then perhaps the layer below you would want it to be a child. If you adjust it to be a child, it doesn't affect the rest of your layers. And that's a really important thing to remember. When you've got two objects that are being affected by a mask, you've got your main mask and you've got the layer that's being affected by it. If you don't make it a composting child, what'll happen is every other layer will be affected by that mask. Now, obviously, masking is something that's a lot more complex than the trimmer, but I'll talk about the timeline now. So this timeline is, as you can see, I've got a bunch of different cuts that I edited in the trimmer. Now if I go like this and open in trimmer, where's my trimmer? I think I may have hidden my trimmer away here. Oh, here it is. It's hiding. That's what happens when I put the preview in this screen, is I commonly will hide my trimmer. So I'll pull some footage down. You can see I can cut my in and out points. I grab it, I move it onto my timeline. This is exactly how it looks. If I do that, I'm going to delete that, because just pretend that I just pulled this down. And then each of my events have their own pan crop and their own effects. But Vegas is set automatically to make crossfades. So if I cross these two, you'll notice that this puts an X in it. That means that it's automatically crossfaded. I'll go into crossfades at a later time, but that's what it does. Quickly with audio, I'll just go through it. Track number, we've got record options, we've got master audio options. Vegas used to be a audio mixing program, and so that's why you're going to see so much advanced audio options. And in fact, Sony Vegas will edit 5.1 surround, and so I'm not even going to get close to touching that in this, but it will. And so there's levels, right, left, different automation settings for recording, effects that you can do on a track level. You can do effects on an individual level. You can do a lot of things. Now the thing about your timeline is that for every event there's a right click. Open in trimmer, select project and media list, media effects, and a bunch of other things. But I'm going to talk about a couple of envelopes right now. I'm going to go like this. Where on the part of the timeline that there's no event, I'm going to go like this. Envelopes are a huge part of Vegas. So if I go insert mute, it'll go on or off. It'll either go on or off. That's what muted does, on or off. And then I'm going to, mute means that there would be no image. You see there's an image there, move it down, there will be no image. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the mute, and I'm going to go like this and go composite level. Now composite level is keyframeable, which allows you to go like this. Oh, we're not watching preview. There we go. And then it sees the composite level. If I had something underneath, it would show the underneath layer quite a bit more. The composite level is quite important when you start dealing with different effects. Get rid of that. Fade to color. Now you can fade to, see, it'll tell you what the fade colors are, top, bottom, and you can fade to those colors. You can, right-clicking on your timeline allows you to do everything that these drop-downs do. See, the drop-downs are quite effective, but why not just do everything right on your timeline? Vegas has a really clean, easy to understand timeline. See right here on this event, that's a fade in. That's a long fade in. Here we've got the start point, the end point, and how long that fade is. So how long this selection is that last one. So that's 6 seconds. All right, here's the amount of time that we could record in the C drive. The controls down here are pretty straightforward. Start at beginning, one frame back, 1 frame forward, play, stop, pause, and you can assign your keyboard to do all of those actions. Here's the playback rate. So if we see, it's got a playback rate of 1, but if I move this over, you'll notice that number goes up, and we're going at 2.09 times the speed. down to 0. So there we go. This I find this to be very, very easy to use. You see, if you double click, it'll go right back to 1. I find this really handy when I am cutting a dance recital. So I don't want to sit through the whole recital. What I do is I just hit LL and it gets me to 1.5. We hit a L again, it gets me to 2. So that's when some of the keyboard stuff comes into play. So yeah, there's the way that you don't really want to operate the timeline without having a mouse, because I am just clicking down on everything and right clicking. If you're using a trackpad, I find it extremely difficult. It's just something to think about. The right click does so much in Vegas. It's almost painful to use a trackpad. So there's a lot of other things that you can do on the timeline, meaning you can put down regions and markers and your cutting options, you know, your trimming options, you know, hit S for slice. You can slice things on your timeline. Everything that you can do in your trimmer, you can do on your timeline, except for create. So you can create a subclip in the trimmer, and you can't do that on your timeline. But the timeline is such a simple thing, such an easy thing. Once you start realizing how straightforward it actually is, and everything that you need is right there for you. But thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions, just notate it down in the doobly-doo. And if you want me to highlight some different part of Vegas, let me know. Just put a message down below or shoot me a message. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you subscribe and like the video. Thank you very much.